Good day, this is Garpaman. That will be reporting about the lesson 12, which is the political dimensions of language teaching and the participatory approach. So in here, we will look at the politics of language use and the language teaching. We will also discuss one language teaching method, the participatory approach, which pays particular attention to the political dimensions of education. The politics of language. So nowadays, learning a language is a political act. So according to the Indian context, politics of language means using the language issue as the means to stay in power or gain power. So nowadays, learning the English language gives power to us. Those that know the English language are empowered in a way that those who do not know it. So, English seems to be the language of power. Many people or many persons around the world want to learn English because we believe that it will help us to get a good education or job. So, learning and knowing the English language nowadays seems to be a power and a skill that will really help us in our life. So people feel that knowing English gives them a greater chance for economic advancement. David Gerdol notes that the availability of language is a global language is accelerating globalization. So on the other hand, the globalization is accelerating the use of English. So the globalization and the English language are both accelerating. Because of the issues in the political question, the whose English should be taught or whose English should be the language of instruction. Should it be the native speaker English as spoken in the United Kingdom or the United States, or what the CACRU calls the other inner circle countries. So this is the inner circle, which is the USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And there are also outer circle and the expanding circle. The truth is, there are many different forms of English because of the different countries that are using the English language. So, um, as the English language evolved in different countries, there is none really the English should be taught. We have our own different English, and English should be taught in different forms. It depends on the country itself. There are clear differences within and among these varieties, so a choice must be made. Former British colonies have evolved their own varieties of native speaker English, which have become established among others as World Englishes. But still, there are many forms of English. It is hard to choose one English among it and to teach around the world. The truth is that there are many different forms of English which are mutually intelligible for the most part, but which also have unique characteristics. In Singapore, there is a standard Singaporean English used for education, and there is Singlish, which is often used for communication within families and among friends. English as a lingua franca. So there is the fact that there are millions of users of English language in CACRU's third circle, which is the expanding circle, who have learned English as an additional language. So it is used primarily to communicate in multilingual contexts, sometimes even those within the same country. In other words, English is used primarily as a contact language, said by Kanagaraha 2006. So this variety has been called English as a lingua franca or English as an international language or global English. ELF, or English as a lingua franca, has features that are different from the English spoken in countries belonging to the inner or the outer circles, whose norms are controlled by native speakers. So, Widow's on question, who owns the English language? So, English belongs to those for whom it is a mother tongue, those who speak it from childhood, by Cummins and Davidson. English is owned by whoever uses it regularly for whatever purpose. This second answer is answered by Seidlhofer, Pretenders and Pilz, 2006. So, they recognize that a common language like English is needed for a sense of community, but they also recognize that a common language can be a threat to multilingualism. In order to have both a unified community and at the same time protect the rights for speakers of all languages, their answer is to consider English as no longer a possession of native speakers of English. As with all languages, then the norms for English as a lingua franca are determined by its users. It's by Walker, 2010. So of course, it is widely spoken around the world. The ELF is not a homogeneous language, and there is certainly no single culture with which it is associated. Scholars who accept the second answer to the question about the ownership of English have identified features of ELF that would not be considered accurate by inner circles native speaker standards, but they are ones that are regular in ELF. This is the one example of ELF. So example is he walked to school every day rather than he walks to school every day. So some teachers point out that while the omission of the S does not seem to affect the substance of a message, it may affect how the speaker is perceived. So speakers frequently omit the S on the end of third persons singular present tense verb. So they say he walked to school every day rather than he walks to school every day. Omitting the S will not be seen as an error if comprehensibility is more important than conformity of the native speaker norms. So the fact is that few learners aspire to be or need to be native live speakers of English. Despite the differences and the argues, ELF, or the English as the lingua franca, does not all discourage speakers from learning and using their local variety and local communicative contexts, regardless of whether this is an inner, outer, or expanding circle of English. It is said by Jenkins, 2006. So, of course, no one outside of the local educational context can really answer the question of which English should be taught in a particular place at a particular time. Critical discourse analysis. It is the study of how identity and power relations are constructed in language. So, critical discourse analysts, such as Fairclough, 2001, observe and comment on how language is linked to social practice and the implicit message that is sometimes conveyed. Stubbs in Badstone, 1995, cite an example of a headline from South African newspaper. So the headline said, "Jubilant blacks clashed with police." So it would have been possible for this headline to have had a different word order, which police clashed with jubilant blacks. In other words, texts are not ideologically neutral. So the lack of neutrality extends to other aspects of identity besides race. So yes, as I said earlier. Also, the lack of neutrality extends to other aspects of identity besides race, and gender discrimination occurs. So, gender discrimination, for example, when language teaching materials present women as always being subservient to men. So, no one is suggesting that teachers not teach the language that their students want to learn. What then can teachers do about the politics of language?
So good afternoon to B1. I am Shela Estanislao and I'm going to report about the critical approaches to pedagogy. So a minimal answer to this question is that it is important for teachers to develop an awareness of political issues around the use of language. Language teachers are not merely teaching language as a neutral vehicle for the expression of meaning. So, critical pedagogy is an approach to teaching that aims to create a more egalitarian society by raising awareness of social injustice as a necessary part of the curriculum. It is a teaching philosophy that invites educators to encourage students to critique structures of power and oppression. So, it is always asking how and why. So, in critical pedagogy, a teacher uses his or her own enlightenment to encourage students to question and challenge inequalities that exist in families, schools, and societies. So, what would we do about critical pedagogy should not be determined by someone else who may be unfamiliar with our teaching context or our political orientation. However, if we wish to become more critical in our teaching, here are a few ideas that have been discussed. So, literacies. So, some educators, G 1996, Look 2004, have explored literacies as a plural rather than singular concept, stressing the fact that participation in a literate English culture means more than being able to read. English learners need to gain access to the specific English language norms, grammar, and vocabulary used by those in power. So students are not just learning to read in English, they would also be learning the discourse of politics or education or business. So learning the unique forms, vocabulary, and norms of different discourses is empowering. So, as a teachers who embrace this idea will find themselves or ourselves examining their teaching practice, choice of text, activities, and assessment tools, looking for when and how power is explicitly and implicitly expressed. So, so in addition, they may decide to work with students on a sample of language, looking at the author's word choices, what grammar structures are used, and other aspects of language use. This activity might be increase students' ability to make vocabulary and grammar choices within the range available to them. So, plurilingualism and multi-competence. To keep one language from complete domination, teachers can foster positive attitudes towards all languages. So, all language learning should be additive and not subtractive. So, in other words, the language being studied So in other words, the language being studied should not replace any other language, but should rather enrich the learner's language capacity. Many learners of English are plurilingual, which refers to an individual's ability to speak when than one language to the extent that they need to without sacrificing any language that they have acquired. Teachers need to respect their students' identities as plurilinguals. In addition, according to Cook, 2002, the goal of language teaching should be successful language use and multi-competence, not trying to get students to imitate monolingual native speaker use. And then the other one is non-native speakers as teachers. So another political issue is the one regarding the speaker status of a teacher. So whether native speaker or non-native speaker. Many language education programs prefer to hire native speakers, presumably for the model they provide and the access they have to intuitions about what is correct and how the language works. So however, in actual fact, non-native speaker speakers bring a great numbers of strengths to language teaching, not the least of which is that they are role models of successful learning themselves. Besides, if they speak the language of their students, they know the obstacles to acquisition and how to surmount them. The teacher's status is a political issue, then not an issue of competence. It is not whether or not they are native speakers of the language they are teaching that makes for a good teacher. So in short, critical means ito yung masusing pag-iisip. So yung masusing pag-iisip yung ginagamit natin, and always asking how and why. In multi-competence means more than one yung kakayanan, and then non-native, ito yung natututunan ng isang tao or teacher habang siya ay tumatanda. Salitang hindi native or mother tongue. So, pag sinabing native speaker, bata pa lang tayo, yun na yung language na alam natin and ginagamit natin.
So, good day. I am Reina May Amlikwanan. I'm from 2B1 and I'm here to discuss first what is hidden curriculum. So, hidden curriculum, a teacher should be aware of hidden curriculum of a language class, what is being taught and learned that is not explicit. So, ang sinasabi dito na as a teacher, dapat aware tayo sa hidden curriculum, which is yung mga tinuturo or na tututunan ng isang estudyante is dapat nakiklear natin sa kanila na without hesitations or without confusing them. So, as we have seen, the politics of teaching and learning English has become a conversation and often a debate in English programs worldwide. To conclude this introductory discussion, here is a question and some suggestion to consider. So, first question, do you see English as something helpful in allowing people from around the world to communicate with each other, or as something that is potentially a problem, the problem of English taking over the world? So, you might want to find out what your student think about this question. So, as a teacher, dapat we should na alam din natin yung side ng mga estudyante natin about this question. So, you might want to find out what your student think about this question. You might also want to explore which forms of English and English literacies to include in your classroom, especially ones that are not included in the curriculum or textbook you have been given. Finally, you might think about the extent to which your student lives, issues, and struggles related to learning English could be discussed in your language classroom. So, because of it, may possibilities na malinawan sila. It is the last point that our lessons in this chapter addresses. So, our next topic is about the participatory approach. So, participatory approach, it begins with meaningful content, form emerge from content. The content is not about subject matter but about issues of interest. Theory engage the student with imitate social problems, unemployment, low income, addiction. The purpose is not just linguistic development but for taking actions and thinking about the problem. So, ang sinasabi dito is yung participatory approach is not it just not focus in linguistic development but also in thinking or talking about the problems. Education is not value free. It is a value loaded where feelings are involved. So education is not value free. Of course it's have a feelings involved. So, one response to the politics of language teaching. In some ways, the participatory approach is similar to content-based instruction in that it begins with content that is meaningful to the student. The language that is worked upon emerges from it. What is strikingly different, though, is the nature of the content. It is not the content of subject matter text, but rather it is context that comes from issues of concern to the student. The participatory approach, It's based on a growing awareness of the role that education, in general, and language education specifically have in creating and perpetuating power dynamics in society. As Anne Berthold have written, education does not substitute for political action, but it is indispensable to it because of the role it plays in the development of critical consciousness that in turn is dependent on the transforming power of language. In the late 1950s, Freire, a Brazilian, developed a Portuguese literacy program for illiterate adults living in slum and rural areas. Members of Freire's literacy team spent time in the communities engaging adults in dialogues about the problems in their lives. From these dialogues, members of the team developed vocabulary lists of words that were important to the people in the communities. Certain of these words become generative words that were used to teach basic decoding and encoding skills, the first step in becoming literate. So, since then, Freire's ideas have been adopted by adult literacy programs around the world. The central premises of Freire's approach is that education and knowledge have value and insofar as they help people liberate themselves from the social conditions that oppress them, the dialogues, therefore, not only have become the basis for literacy development, but also for reflection and action to improve student lives. So, education is not value-free. It occurs within a particular context. The goal of a participatory approach is to help students to understand the social, historical, or cultural forces that shapes a particular context, and then to help empower students to take action and make decisions in order to gain control over their lives in that context. So, sinasabi dito na ang participatory approach is tinutulungan talaga yung estudyante na maintindihan yung social, yung historical, at saka yung culture forces na makakapag-shape sa kanila or para makontrol nila yung buhay nila sa iba't ibang context. Like John Dewey Freire, 1970, criticized what he called the banking method of teaching, in which the teacher deposits information in the students, making the assumption that the teacher knows what the students need to learn. Instead, he advocates educational process where student lives, local cultural norms, and issues become the content for learning. So, ang sinasabi dito na hindi dapat na yung teachers na sinasabi niya is alam niya lahat nung kailangan ng estudyante. So, he encouraged teachers to use these topics to create the basics for all teaching and learning. In this way, the teacher is no longer deposing information but is rather allowing learning to emerge from within the student. A core practice of the participatory approach is problem posing. Problem posing involves the selection of real-life issues from the students' lives and engage the students in an open-ended process of problem solving.
So, good morning. So, I'm here to continue the discussions about the participatory approach. So, here we go. Thinking about the experience. So, in this, we will discuss about the observations in the participatory approach in a classroom practices. So, the first one is the teacher dialogues with students in order to learn what is happening in their lives. So the principal use is what happens in the classroom should be connected with what happens outside. So as a teacher, so you will having a conversation to your students that he can relate to her life, his or her life. So kasi 'di ba kapag ang hirap kasi kapag tayo lang yung nakakaintindi kasi dapat pati yung estudyante din natin mismo ay naiintindihan kung ano yung sinasabi natin. Next one is the teacher poses a problem that was voiced by several women during a discussion from a previous class. So, the principal use is the curriculum is not a predetermined product, but the result of an ongoing context-specific problem-posing process. So, in this, the teacher possesses a problem. So, in this, yung bata ay makakapag-isip siya kung ano yung maaaring mangyari sa binigay na problema ng isang teacher. So, for the third, the teacher as a number leads the class in discussing the problem. The principal use is education is most effective when it is experience-centered, when it relates to students' real needs. Because as a students, it's important to them to realize or relate their lives of what happening or what we discuss in your having a conversation with. So for the fourth, the teacher asks the students if they want to write a group letter. She elicits the content of the letter from the students by asking leading questions. The principle, when knowledge is jointly constructed, it becomes a tool to help students find a voice, and by finding their voices, students can act in the world. So it's important to them to malaman kung ano yung gusto nilang sabihin. So you can they can they can speak whatever they want based on their problems that the teacher asks to their students. So, for the fifth, the teacher writes down what the students tell her. She reads the text aloud, and the students do too. She asks them if they want to make any changes. She offers feedback as well. After the changes have been made, the teacher has the students read the letter out loud several times. So the principle, language teaching occurs with texts that the students have co-constructed. So as a teacher, we should practice how to how to deliver it clearly for the students para maintindihan nila. So, as a teacher, we ask them if we want to clarify or asking a question to clarify something that they didn't know, or hindi nila masyadong naintindihan. So we are open to 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 change, or to kung ano yung man yung maaaring ibahin. So bukas tayo dun sa opinion ng iba for them to have a language learning. So for the sixth, afterwards, the students copy the letter in their notebooks. They work on editing for homework. So the principles focus on linguistic from occurs within a focus on content. Language skills are taught in service of actions for change rather than is isolation. So diba when we are in a classroom setup, we give them a take home, or what we called it homework, for them to to edit to edit something what they write on it. So in that, we can act for a change rather than the isolation. So hindi natin sila ina-isolate. So nagfa-focus lang tayo about the content to edit kung ano pa yung maaaring ibahin. So, the next is, the students are asked to bring their revised versions for the letters to the next class for others to read. Principles, students can create their own materials, which in turn can become text for other students. So, to this, willing tayo na mag-revise, especially those students to revise versions of their letters, kasi mas maganda pa rin we have an originality. Yung original mong ginawa. Kasi having a letter, mas maganda pa rin kung ikaw mismo yung gagawa para mababasa ng iba na kung ano-ano yung mga letters na ginawa nyo. So for the last, the students discuss what they have learned in the class and what they want to learn in the future. The principle, a goal of the participatory approach is for students to evaluate their own learning and increasingly direct it themselves. It is one way that can feel empowered. So, as a students, for them to students, ah, mas natututo sila for them in the future to discuss what they learn. So, the goal of this participatory approach is for to feel empowered and confident what they learn from their teachers. So, they na-empower yung kanilang mga sarili. So, after that, we move on to about the reviewing the principles. So the first questions is, what are the goals of teachers who use the participatory approach? The answer is, the teachers' goals are to teach language that is meaningful and to raise the political consciousness of the students. Teachers want their students to be empowered to use the language they are learning in order to solve political problems in their lives. Because, 'di ba, as a students, mas ang goal lang naman nating mga teacher is to maintindihan nila kung ano yung nakagawian nating political consciousness, yung kung ano ba yung meron tayo sa ngayon, para mamulat sila kung ano ba ang nangyayari sa mundo. Then, kung ano ba yung nakagisnan nila para in the future, malaman nila at kung paano nila masosolve yung lahat ng problema. So, for the next, what is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the students? So, the answer is, the teacher dialogues with the students in order to identify problems they are having. They then look for ways to incorporate these problems into the lessons. These problems become the content she focuses on in language construction. The students are encouraged to share the daily concerns of their lives with the teacher and the class. Because as a teacher, it is important to have a communications with our students. Especially when the students is being feel isolated for other students. So, as a teacher, we need to yung mapapalapit pa tayo sa kanila para mas alam nila na kahit papano may nasasabihan sila ng mga problema nila para magkaroon pa tayo ng magandang relationship as a teacher and as a student. So for the third, what are the some characteristic of the teaching or learning process? So, the teacher leads the students in a discussions about what their lives. From these discussions, she identifies problems that the class can work on as a whole. She then treat these problems to be students. Students learn how to use language in real-world situations in order to address their problems. Knowledge is jointly constructed with the teacher asking questions and the students responding. Collaborations among students is also encouraged. So, it focus on how the students and teacher can respond to each other. Example, as a teacher, we ask questions to the students what they learn in our discussions. So, as students, they respond to us what they learn. So, for the fourth question is, what is the nature of students-teacher interaction? What is the nature of student interaction? The teacher is supportive to her students. She helps them advocate for themselves. She helps the students find solutions to problems while also teaching them the necessary language to understand, discuss, and address these problems. Students work supportively with one another because as a teacher, he or she is the one who becomes supportive for them for his or her students, because he or she is the only only parent in a classroom settings. Because kasi 'di ba, as a teacher mahalaga pa rin na tayo mismo yung nag-guide sa kanila to find solution to their problems, and also teaching them necessary language for them to interact also to other people and to the whole world. So for the fifth, how are the feelings of the students deal with? The students learn what their feelings are important, and that their study of language is relevant to their lives. The students are invited to express their feelings. They are also empowered by directing and evaluate their own learning. So, mahalaga pa rin yung pagdidil nating pagkocontrol, ng feelings as a student, because it can affect your study dealing with your feelings. So for the sixth, how is the language view? How is culture view? Language is an instrument of power necessary for active and equal participation in society. Language is not a neutral subject. Culture relates to students' daily experience. So, in this, sinasabi lang nila na ang language and culture is equally to each other, because it relates for what our culture, and it also our language that's used. So for the seven, what areas of language are emphasized? What language skills are emphasized? Language is used meaningful with a focus on form subordinate to communication initially. Ultimately, correctness of form is taught and valued so that student can be successful in using language with authorities. Literacy is taught to be very important. Also, although no skill is neglected. So, for the seven, language is, sinasabi lang dito, in language skills and language are emphasized, that is very important for us to communicate, especially that's important to communicate to other people. So that is the language emphasized. So for the eighth, what is the role of the student's native language? The student's native language is value. It should not be lost when students learn a new language. So, especially today, marami sa ngayon yung mga students na they adapt the other languages of different countries. So, as a student, dapat hindi pa rin natin malimutan kung ano ba yung sa atin mismo. Kasi minsan nakakalimutan na natin kung ano ba yung lengguwahe dapat na ginagamit natin. So, it is important to love our own languages. So, for 9, how is evaluation accomplished? As much as possible, the students are encouraged to direct and to evaluate their own learning so that it is connected with their lives. So for the last, how does the teacher respond to students' error? Students are encouraged to self-correct. The teacher also points out students' error and provides feedback on how to correct errors. Diba? Especially sa school setting. Pero as a students, mas maganda pa rin kung tayo mismo yung magsosolve o magko-correct ng sarili natin. So as a teacher, we guide them to how to correct them para mas malaman nila sa susunod, parang ganon, parang iiwasan nila na natuto na tayo doon. So dapat tandaan din natin yon. So as a teacher, we guide them to correct about their errors. So that's it. So for the reviewing the techniques, so this for the reviewing of the techniques, it it discussed the participatory approach. So here are the two special techniques associated with the participatory approach. The first one is a dialoguing and problem posing. So in dialoguing, in the participatory approach, teacher and students dialogue about issues in the students' lives that relate their own power and the power of others. Students are encouraged to perceive critically what they exist in the world with which and in which they find themselves. So dito, we are dialoguing to one another about about issues that we experience in our lives. So in that, we pa we we encourage to to communicate to one another. So for the second problem posing, the teacher poses a problem that she has identified from a dialoguing with students. Students are encouraged to examine their own practices and beliefs and to engage in collaborative planning and problem solving around the problem that has been posed. So as a teacher, she identified the problem in dialoguing with your students. So, siya yung mag-identify kung ano ba ang problema sa pagdadialogo sa isang student. So, for that, para malaman kung ano ba yung kung anong dapat gawin para ma-solve yung problem na between with your students. So, that's it. So, for the last conclusions, in this chapter, we have investigated the political dimensions of language teaching and learning, and all we had experience with the participatory approach as one way to address this issue through classroom practice. So, yung kanina yung thinking about the experience. So, ayan yung sinasabi na in a classroom practice. In her introduction of participatory practices in adult education, Campbell 2001 defines the global of participatory practices as building a just society through individual and socioeconomic transformation and ending domination through changing power relations. While this is an ambiguous goal, teacher can contribute to meeting it. As North American teachers, educators Hawking and Norton have written, because language, culture, and identity have integrally related. Language teachers are in a key position to address educational inequality, both because of the particular learners they serve, many of whom are marginalized members of the wider community, and because of the subject matter they teach, language, which can serve itself to both empower and marginalize. That is the written of Hawkins and Norton of the American Teacher Educators. So, for the last, of course, in some setting, even to suggest that there are social problems is to implicitly criticize the government, which can be seen as threatening. Clearly, whatever or not to address political dimensions of language teaching will have to be determined by each teacher. Whatever you believe about political dimensions of language teaching, do you see the value of working on issues, if not a problem, that are relevant to your students? Live so that your teaching can be vehicle for the personal empowerment as well as their language experience. If so, you should ask yourself which, if any, of the techniques presented here you can adapt to your own teaching content. So, that's all. And thank you. So, by the way, I'm Nadia El Nabril. And that's my report.
So, in this topic, we're going to discuss about learning strategy training, cooperative learning, and multiple intelligence. So, introduction. In this chapter, we're going to discuss the three methodological innovations, which I have mentioned earlier: the learning strategy training, cooperative learning, and the multiple intelligence. So, learning strategy training. When discussing the cognitive approach, language learning were seen to be more effectively responsible for their own learning. In keeping with this perception, in 1975, Robin investigated what good language learners did to facilitate. So, mm, in 1975 po, si Robin conducted an investigation to know what good language learners did to facilitate their learning. Kung anong pwedeng good language na magpa-facilitate of their learning. Next is, from this investigation, she identified some of their learning strategies, the techniques or devices which a learner may use to acquire knowledge. Good language learners, according to Robin, are willing and accurate guessers who have a strong desire to communicate. They attend to both the meaning and the form of their messages. They also practice and monitor their own speech as well as the speech of others. So, from the investigation Robin conducted, she identified some of the learning strategies, which are the techniques or devices that learner can use po to acquire knowledge. While early research went towards identifying just these kinds of strategies, it was not long before language educators realized simply recognizing learners' contribution to the process was not sufficient. While this early research daw, hindi nagtagal, they realized that simply recognizing learners' contribution of the process is not sufficient po. Yun. We then, 1985, observed that language teachers' time might be profitably spent in learning training as much as in language training. Suggestion lead to the idea of learning strategy training, training students in the use of learning in order to improve their learning effectiveness. That's what we then said. So next, cooperative learning. Cooperative learning, sometimes called collaborative learning, initially involves students learning from each other in a group. So from the word itself, cooperative, so it is sometimes called collaborative learning. So you have to collab or cooperative with other groups po to acquire knowledge and learning. But it's not a group configuration that makes cooperative learning distinctive. It is the way that students and teachers work together that is important. Learning strategy training, the teachers teach the student to learn how to learn more effectively. So it's not about always the groupings. It's about it's about the way the student po and the teachers work together. So the teachers will gonna teach the students for that the student will learn more effectively. Next, in cooperative learning, teachers teach students collaborative or social skills so that they can work together more effectively. Indeed, cooperation is not only the way of learning, but also a theme of communicated about and studied. So, sinasabi po na cooperation is not only the way of learning, it is also about communication and study.
Strategy training, cooperative learning, and multiple intelligence. Thinking about experience, let us list our observations and review the principles of cooperative learning. Observations. The vocabulary lesson will be done in cooperative groups. Each student is to help the other students learn the new vocabulary words. Principles. Students are encouraged to think in terms of positive interdependence, which means that the students are not thinking competitively and individualistically, but rather cooperatively and in terms of the group. Student encouraged to think positive interdependence. Means, yung students, dapat di siya nakikipagkompetensya sa mga kapwa niya estudyante. Dapat yung mindset niya or yung tumatatak sa isip niya is yung unity as a group. Second, the student asks which group they should form. The teacher tells them to stay in the same group they have been in this week. In cooperative learning, students often stay together in the same group for a period of time so they can learn how to work better together. In cooperative learning, ina-acquire sila na mag-stay together in the same group, which is magkahalo yung babae at lalaki. Yung teacher, nag-assign siya ng leader sa isang group, and yung leader na yon siyang bahala na pagsamahin yung babae at lalaki, yung mga babae at lalaki na students na nanggaling sa iba't ibang ethnic groups or different proficiency level so that they will learn from each other and matututo sila na pakisamahan yung iba't ibang kaklase nila na mayroong iba't ibang kaugalian or nakasanayan. Third, the teacher gives the student the criteria for judging how well they have performed the task they have been given. There are consequences for the groups and the whole class. The effort of an individual help not only the individual to be rewarded but also others in the class. So, yung na-accomplish na isang student is hindi lang siya mismo yung magbe-benefits, kundi lahat sila as a group. Halimbawa, maganda yung na-accomplish ng isang member. Kung may kaakibat man tong reward, yung nagawa na yun, hindi lang siya dapat yung magbe-benefit nun. Dahil member siya at may mga ka-member siya, so silang buong grupo ang mag-a-acquire ng reward na yun. Fourth, the students are to work on the social skill of encouraging others. Social skills such as acknowledging another's contribution, asking others to contribute, and keeping the conversation calm need to be explicitly taught. Yon, halimbawa nito is yung pag may binigay na activity yung teacher, as a group, ikaw na member, dapat matuto ka na hingin din yung opinion or contribution ng classmates mo or ng kagrupo mo. And of course, dapat yung samahan nyo as a group is solid. Dapat di kayo nagkakaroon ng pagtatalo sa paggawa ng desisyon. Dapat calm lang kayo para yung outcome ng activity nyo or nung gawa nyo is maganda at maayos. Fifth, the students appear to be busy working in their groups. There is much talking in a groups. Language acquisition is facilitated by students interacting the target language. Yon, mas mapapadali yung pag-intindi nila sa language acquisition kung may interaction sila with the target language. Sixth, students take the test individually. Although students work together, each student is individually accountable. Yon, kahit nagwo-work together sila as a group, they will be graded pa rin depende sa result ng exam nila individually. Hindi porket magkakagrupo sila is yung grade pare-parehas na. Kasi iba naman yung academic skill ng bawat isa at pag nag-test sila, dun pa rin magbe-base ang teacher sa pagbibigay ng grade individually. 7. Students compare and combine scores. The student put their group's scores on each of their papers. Responsibility and accountability for each other's learning is shared. Each group member should be encouraged to feel responsible for participating and for learning. Diyon, as a group, they must be responsible and accountable so that everyone should be encouraged to participate, to learn, and also para maging maayos at matapos yung activity nila ng may magandang result. 8. The group discusses how the target social skill has been practiced. Each student is given a role. The teacher gives feedback on how students did on the target social skill. Leadership is distributed. Teachers not only teach language, they teach cooperation as well. Leadership, sinasabi dito na leadership is distributed. So, sinasabi na yung teacher is di lang siya basta language yung tinuturo niya, but of course, cooperation at pakikisama rin ng bawat estudyante. Siyempre, nakikipag-socializing sila. E di nabibuild din yung pagiging cooperative ng bawat isa. Next, multiple intelligence. In the language teaching field, some of the difference among students have been attributed to students having different learning or cognitive style. However, it has been estimated that for up to 25% of the population, the mode of instruction does make a difference in their success as learners. Hatch further distinguishes between learners who are data gatherers and those who are rule formers. Related work by psychologist Howard Gardner on multiple intelligences has been influenced in language teaching circles. Gardner has theorized that individuals have at least 8 distinct intelligences that can be developed over a lifetime. The 8 are: first one is logical or mathematical, the ability to use numbers effectively, to see abstract patterns, and to reason well. It is skilled at deducting reasoning, detecting patterns, and logical thinking, while visual or spatial, the ability to orient oneself in the environment, to create mental images, and a sensitive to shape, size, color. They can picture with their mind eyes, while body kinetics, the ability to use one's body to express oneself and to solve problems. So, ability to process information physically through hand or body movements, controls, and expression. Fourth is musical, rhythmic, the ability to recognize tonal patterns and a sensitivity to rhyme, pitch, melody. Ability to easily create musical, time, rhyme, and pitches. Yung mga tao na may ganitong gift ay mabilis yung pagre-recall nila or pagtatanda nila ng mga melodies and mga musical structure. Next is interpersonal, the ability to understand another person's moods, feelings, motivations, and intentions. More on emotions level naman to. May ability siya na i-assist yung feelings ng ibang tao at may kakayahan siyang i-handle yung mga emotional situations. While intrapersonal, the ability to understand oneself and to practice self-disciplines. So, ito naman, focus sa sarili niya. Mas more siya sa mas aware siya sa feelings niya, sa feelings niya sa sarili niya, at mas priority niya yung planning with his or herself and managing his or her life. 7. Verbal or linguistic, the ability to use language effectively and creatively. So, dito naman nakakapagpahayag siya ng information at nakakapaglahad siya ng thoughts or iba pa mang uri ng kaisipan. At yung mga tao na may ganitong skills ay considered good at memorizing informations. 8. Naturalist, the ability to relate to natures, to classify what is observed. Ito naman yung mga tao na malaki yung interest pagdating sa nature and And yung relationship niya pagdating sa mga plants and animals ay naturally work na or anything na nakikita niya sa paligid niya is like yung mga puno, mga ganyan. Yung relationship niya sa mga yon is deep. Next, some teachers feels that they need to create activities that draw on all eight, not only to facilitate language acquisition among diverse students, also to help them realize their full potential with all of the intelligences. By being aware of which type of intelligence is being tapped by a particular activity, teachers can keep track of which type they are emphasizing or neglecting in the classroom and aim for a different representation if they so choose. Christison and Armstrong gave us example of activities that fit each type of intelligence. First one is logical, mathematical. So, nabibuild niya is yung mga puzzles and games, logical, sequential presentations, classification and categorization. So, yan yung 8 na nabibuild ng yan yung 8 na fit types of intelligence. Basahin nyo na lang. A second way to teach from a multiple intelligence perspective is to deliberately plan lessons so that the different intelligences are represented. Here is one lesson plan, adapted and expanded from Emanuela Agustini, which addresses all of the intelligences. Step 1. Give students a riddle and ask them to solve it in pairs. I have eyes, but I can see nothing. I have ears, but I hear nothing. I have a mouth, but I cannot speak. If I am young, I stay young. If I am old, I stay old. What am I? Answer is a person in a painting or photograph. It was considered intelligences, interpersonal and verbal, linguistic. It shows emotions and expression. Kaya siya na-considered na interpersonal, while verbal and linguistic naman dahil he was describing verbally. Step 2. Guided imagery. Tell students to close their eyes and to relax. Then describe a picture of a scene or a portrait. Ask them to imagine it. Play music while you are giving the students the description. Intelligences. It was spatial or visual, intelligence, and musical. Sabi is visual because they are imagining a portrait in their mind. So nakakakita sila ng picture sa pamamagitan na ng pag-iisip kasi parang nakakabuo sila sa kaisipan nila ng picture base dun sa nilalahad ng context. And also, it was considered verbal or linguistic. It was considered musical din dahil habang ginagawa yon, may nagpe-play na music. Step 3. Distribute to each person in a small group a written description of the same pictures they have just here described. Each description is incomplete, however, and no two in the group are quite the same. For example, one description worked together with the other members of their group to fill in the missing words. Intelligences was interpersonal, verbal, or linguistic because it was considered interpersonal because they are having expressions. Verbal dahil nagkakaroon sila ng debates, hindi yung debates na pagtatalo sa kundi debates sa pag-find out ng missing words. Fourth one is step 4, ask the group to create a tableau of the pictures by acting out the description they have just compared. Intelligence was body kinesthetics because merong body movements. They are dahil they are going to act the description they have just completed. Kaya ito ay considered na body kinesthetics dahil may body movements. Next, forming a tableau representing a portrait to illustrate kinetic intelligence. Step 5. Show the students the picture. Ask them to find 5 things about it that differ from their tableau or from how they imagine the paintings to look. Intelligence was logical or mathematical because they are going to find out 5 things differ from their tableau. This is sequential presentation and logical. Kaya siyang na-considered na logical or mathematical. Step 6. Ask students to identify the tree in the painting. Intelligence was naturalist dahil yung tree is part of the nature. Kaya siya na-consider na naturalist. Step 7. Reflection. Ask students if they have learned anything about how to look at a picture. Ask them if they have learned anything new about the target language. Intelligence was intrapersonal. Dahil nagkakaroon ng reflection is self-evaluation or making a journal. Next, the challenge for teachers who wish to honor the diversity of intelligences among their students is how to activate the others' intelligences and enable each student to reach his or her full potential while not losing sight of the teacher's purpose, which is to teach language. Gardner proposes 5 minds ways of thinking and acting in the world, which students need to develop. Of the 5 minds, 3 focus on intellectual developments and 2 minds on character's development. First one is the disciplinary mind is the first of the intellectual minds, in which students master a traditional body of information, such as important historical developments in a particular country. The disciplinary mind is the first of the intellectual minds. So, sinasabi dito na yung students is namamaster niya na yung isang history ng isang country. Halimbawa, history ng Pilipinas. So, yon meron siyang kakayahan na i-master na yung history kung ano nga ba yung mga pinagdaanan muna bago natin nakamit yung kalayaan, ganyan, or kung ano nga ba yung mga nagawa ng mga heroes natin sa pagkamit natin ng kalayaan. Yun lang yung example. Second, the second mind that deals with intellectual development is the synthesizing mind, where the focus shifts to bring together, organizing, understanding, and articulating information from various disciplines in a unified and coherent whole. An example is comparing literature in Spanish, Arabic, and English to learn how the history of people speaking these languages has shaped literary styles. Third, the third mind is the creating mind, where students are encouraged to come up with new ideas, original solutions to problems, and creative questions. This could include creative writing or original historical or political analysis. We might consider use of the creating mind as an example of thinking outside the box. Thinking is an unusual way. So students encountered new ideas na makakatulong sa pag-solve ng problems, and they could make creative writing as well as pag-analyze ng mga historical or political things. We could say their thinking become more unusual and even wide in society's issues. Fourth is a well-developed, respectful mind is reflected by an awareness of appreciation for and openness to the difference and individually of others. So, sa pagtanggap sa pagkakaiba-iba ng mga individual, and also acceptance and respect sa cultural backgrounds, religions, and also sa kinalakihan ng bawat isa. Maging yung identity ng bawat estudyante is kailangan maging open-minded sila. Kasi alam naman natin na sa isang lugar, hindi natin masasabi na sa isang lugar na yon is lahat yon, yung kultura doon is magkakapareho. Syempre may mga tao na dayo at iba yung nilang kultura. So mahalaga na tanggapin natin yon at tanggapin natin yon at mahalin. Fifth is the ethical mind encourage students to cultivate sense of responsibility for themselves, for the well-being of others. Teaching students in a way that includes these 5 minds might encourage students to develop important skills for life and work in the world while also learning a language. So applying these 5 minds might encourage the students to become responsible on their act, even knowing the important skills for life, skills of life in life. Learn about world while learning a language. Conclusion: as a teacher, it can be useful to be reminded about the unique qualities of each of our students. So, yun, importante para sa mga students na malaman yung kalagahan ng learning strategies, training, cooperative learning, and multiple intelligences. Actively, di lang para sa mga student, pati na rin sa mga teachers, para malaman ng mga teachers yung mga practices and teaching skills na makakatulong upang mas mapaunlad pa o mas mapalawak pa nila yung kaalaman nila in terms sa pag-handle ng iba't ibang klase ng estudyante, at para ma-inform din sila sa benefits sa sarili nila sa pag-aaral ng mga bagay na ituturo niya sa students niya, at para ma-inform din siya sa magandang effects nito.
Hi, my name is Iralyn Mazon, and I will be the reporter of Chapter 14, which is Emerging Uses of Technology in Language Teaching and Learning. So, I will going to report that the introduction, experience, and thinking about the experience. Introduction. There are 2 main ways to think about technology for language learning. The technology as providing teaching resources, and the technology as providing enhanced learning experiences. The technology as providing teaching resources. For years, the technology may have only been chalk and blackboard. Then later on, film strips, audio, and video recording and playback equipment were addition to the technological tools available to many teachers. So before, sinasabi dito na ang ginagamit lang noon for teaching resources are only the chalk and the blackboard. But later on, when the time passed by at nag-upgrade nga ang ating teaching resources, nagkakaroon na tayo ng technical tools, which is film strips that is made up of different pictures, then audio and video recording, and playback equipment. The internet, which connect millions of of computers around the world, makes it possible to communicate from one computer to another. So, because of the technology, because of the internet, nagkaroon tayo ng kakayahang connect from one computer to another. And then, as a result, the World Wide Web, or WWW, or the web, a way of accessing informations over the internet. Then, it means, WWW means World Wide Web or the web. It is a way of accessing information over the internet. So, for example, you want to access to Facebook. Then then you can go to Google, then type www.facebook.com, and then that's it.
you can get some information that you wanted. So computer also provide the means to access online dictionaries, grammars, and style checkers. So before, 'di ba, the only dictionaries that we have is only through books. Kailangan pang buklatin at hanapin yung words. But because of the computer, nagkaroon tayo ng access sa online dictionaries. Kaya mas napapadali na yung pag-research natin sa mga words na gusto nating malaman. Then, number two, the technology as providing enhanced learning experiences. So, technology is no longer simply contributing machinery or making authentic material or more resources available that teachers can use. It also provides learners with greater access to the target language. So, ayun, ang technology daw is hindi lamang nakakapag-contribute ng mga machineries like computers, cellphones, tablet, and etc. Then, and because of the technology, mas napapadali ang pag-access natin na matuto sa pag-aaral ng kanilang target language. As a result, it has the potential to change where and when learning takes place. Furthermore, it can even shape how we view the nature of what it is that we teach. So because of the internet, the technology, napoprovide din ito ang mga information about different natures and different places. Technology leads to innovation. According to current 2006, rapid evolutions of communication technologies has changed language pedagogy and language use. So it says that technology leads to innovations, and because of the rapid evolution of communication by using of technology, the method of practicing language teaching can be changed. The discourse and authorship. Student post message online. So, ang way ng pagpapasa ng message is through online na. Then, written and oral language. For example, nito is yung audio and video recording. Communication has no borders. You can communicate with someone kahit na nasang lupalo pa siya ng mundo. Then, according to Thorne, 2006, with the use of technology, students are more likely to use language for ongoing identity formation and personal meaningful communication in the service of goals that extend beyond practice or learning in the restrictive senses associated with institutional setting. So because of technology, we can now have access by other people in different countries, and because of the communication, it can help practicing and learning the target language. Individualization. Technology also allows teaching to be tailored to the individual to a greater extent than is normally possible. Because of the internet and technology, every individual can possibly learn in a greater extent as possible. A few computer-assisted language learning call programs can even adapt to diverse learners by analyzing their input and providing customized feedback and remedial exercises suited to their proficiency. Ay mga learners din daw, itong call na to is naglalabas din sila ng computer adaptive testing for student para malaman nila yung mga kakayahan pa nito. Social interaction. Complementing the greater individual is the greater social interaction that can result from the ability to link student through network computers. So, social interaction. So, because of the teaching technology, nakakatulong ito para ang bawat isa is mag-link to each other. So, it is because of the social interacting. Social interaction can help students co-construct their knowledge by building on one another's experience. And because of social interactions, mas nakakakuha pa tayo ng more information to something by sharing different knowledges. Reflections on language. The fact that interactions in technology happens mainly through writing means that the interaction is available for later reflections and analysis. So, diba, in Facebook, we always chatting than taking video calls and more. And because of that, nababalikan mo yung mga conversation mo with your friend. So, bakit mo nga ba binabalikan? It is because nagre-reflect ka and ina-analyze mo yung mga conversation mo with your friend. Next, technology. It enhances language learning experiences. It also contributes to shaping our understanding of the natures of the language. So, sa pamamagitan ng technology is mas nai-enhance pa natin yung ating kaalaman about the language. Language is not a fixed system. Instead, it is always changing and being changed by those who used it. It is according to Larson Freeman and Cameron 2008. So, sinasabi dito na language can be changed by the one who using it. Grammaring is not knowledge of grammar rules, but is rather than the ability to use grammar structures accurately, meaningfully, appropriately, and creatively as well. So, grammaring is not about the rules because it is about the ability on how you use it. According to Kern 2006, despite what technology has to offer, we should always remember that it is not technology per se that affects the learners of language and culture, but the particular uses of technology. This emphasis on use highlights the central importance of pedagogy and the teachers. So, before we move on to the experience, let me introduce a few things of the terms that will be used in the lesson. A blog. A blog is an abbreviation of web plus blog. Is a personal online journal. The author of the journal can update it as often as he or she desires with personal reflections or by adding materials from other sources. So, blog, it is a personal online journal wherein you can share your own thoughts, ideas, experience, and etc. If you want something new in your blogs, you can update it anytime you want. Next, a social networking site. A social networking website such as Facebook is accessed via the web. For web address, see page 218. Participants have their own homepage on the site to which they add personal information, links to other online sources, photos, and etc. A participant has friends who are other participant with whom they choose to be connected. If someone is your friend, you can see information and photo he or she has chosen to share. So, the best example of social networking site is Facebook, wherein if you want to be friend with your best friend, you can just search her name, then you can add him or her. You can also share your personal information in it, and your friends will the one who will see it. Next, YouTube. YouTube is a website where one can watch and share short videos. Most YouTube videos are available to anyone who has a high-speed connection to the internet. The range of topic is vast, including actual videos from language classroom, lectures, and small vignettes from everyday lives. So YouTube is a site wherein you will see different kinds of videos like cover song, cooking show, dance cover, and even actual videos from language classroom.
and it is available to anyone. Wiki. A wiki is a quick way of being able to create and edit web documents. Wikis are very useful in collaborative writing tasks, and they are very good for highlighting and observing the process of writing. So, wiki is a web document wherein you can edit some information in it. It is open to all that who wants to share information. For example, if you want to add some information about your barangay in Wikipedia, you can just add it in there because it is a collaboration of information. Then last, electronic text corpus. An electronic text corpus is a collection of authentic spoken and written text, often consisting of thousands, if not millions, of words. The corpus is computer searchable. The teachers of student can find many instances of a particular word or phrases as it is used in a sentence. The instances can then be analyzed for the form, meaning, and use of words or expression, its frequency, and for what precedes and what follows it in a sentence. So electronic text corpus, if you want to search a word or a sentence, it is the best way wherein you can find the different meaning of the word and the different form of the sentence. So let's proceed to the experience. First of all, I will going to introduce the class, which is the following class takes place at an English language institute in Thailand. The class consists of 16 students between the ages of 16 and 30 who are high intermediate learners of English. Their class are they meet for 1.5 hours 2 times a week, and the classes are held in the evenings because the students are also attending school and working job. The institute has classroom equipped with the following technology: a computer and a liquid crystal displays or LCD projector, an overhead projector, and a TV and VCR DVD unit. Then there are 20 computers offering high-speed internet access and printers. So next, I will going to discuss the three prior tasks to the lesson. So their first task is they have been asked to maintain an online blog in which they regularly record their experience in learning English. Some of students have used this as a record of new vocabulary or to new comments on a particular English language website they have found useful, while other students have chosen to use their blog as their personal reflection. And then some students, they discussed their experiences they are having in finding ways to use the language or reactions that others have their use of English. And also, each student has also been told to comment on at least three other classmate blogs every week. So because of it, nagkaroon dito ng social interaction because of commenting of their classmates' blogs. Then next, task 2. The student have created a profile on a social network site which is Facebook. The student have to log on to Facebook a minimum of 3 times per week in order to read what their classmates have posted and to update their status. They also have been encouraged to respond to the status update of their classmates. In addition, as the nature of social networking site, the student each have their own set of friends who are not a member of the class and with whom they also exchange information and updates of their classmates. So for the last and final ongoing task, the students are asked to do some research for the wiki that they have created with classmates, and they choose a topic that they wanted the world to know about. Uh, and they chose traditional Thai dance forms. On an ongoing basis, they edit a wiki documents on this topic by adding information and links to external website and commenting on each other's contribution. And then the optional tasks. Some of the students have also chosen to correspond with a pen pals, and some even chat electronically in real time with their pen pals. So, pen pals, ito yung makakausap mo and makaka-sharing mo ng information. As the class begins, there is lively chatters about the assignment they have been working on, both in English and in Thai. First, the teacher asks the student to check their language learning plugs. Then second, the discussion begins by asking questions. The questions are, how many of you have received comments on your blogs? Did you receive any comments that were surprising? Did you receive any comments from someone not in the class? And then, who is willing to share a comment? So the first student to share his comment was Tuk. And then Tuk says that he received comments from an English language student in Jakarta, Indonesia, who wants to know if he used the word that he written, sige, in his everyday speaking. This Indonesian student is Daddy. He said that he only seen the word written and never spoken. And then the teacher asked for ideas from the class of how might Tuk respond to Daddy's comment, and how have you heard the word sige. Many students have not heard the word before. Then those that are familiar with the word have only seen it in print. And then the teacher suggests that later in the lesson, they will use a computer corpus to see that they can learn what they can learn about sige. So that computer corpus is makakatulong sa kanila para malaman nila yung meaning ng word na sige. Then the second student to share his comment was Lek. Lek says that he received a comment from an English student in Costa Rica named Alejandro that he don't understand that he don't not understand. The teacher asked how can we help Lek understand what Alejandro was trying to tell her. The class switches to a mixture of English and Thai for a new minutes as they brainstorm and the best ways to respond to Alejandro. Let's think that she will be able to use the suggestion of her teacher and classmate to communicate with Alejandro. Next, the teacher asked the student to form pairs at a computer. She tells them to take turns opening up their Facebook pages and reviewing together what has been posted there. After 10 minutes, the teacher asked a few questions, and that question are, what idioms or special use of English did you encounter or use on your Facebook page? What do you think these idioms means? Did you try to use any new language on Facebook? Lam tells that the class that she used the idiom is get a grip. The student compared their ideas on the meaning of get a grip. The teachers then suggest that they consult an online corpus or the British corpus. And then their teacher asked what they noticed about a phrase get a grip when they search it in the British National Corpus. And then the student realized that it is always or almost always followed by the preposition on. In checking further examples, they see that it can sometimes be followed by the preposition of. They note that it was also used as a command get a grip. They discussed whether or not this form has a different meaning from the phrase with on in it. With the teacher guidance, they see that get a grip could be used literally to mean in physical hold or more metaphorically to mean in control. Then they go to the online dictionary and type get a grip on and find out that it means to obtain mastery or control over something or someone, and that it can also occur with the verb have. And then they also do a corpus search and create a concordance for Tuk's word sige. They discovered that it is only used infrequently. There were only 2 instances in the entire 100 million word PNC or British National Corpus. Moreover, one of them was in the name of a company, and both instances were found in written text. They concluded that the Indonesian student was probably right. It probably is not like to be used often in conversation. And then Tuk says that she will let him know. And then the teacher tells the student again to turn back to their computers in pairs. And then the teacher directs the pairs to a YouTube site wherein they watch a rock band performing its latest hit songs. The student watched the video and listened to the song. And then the pairs will going to post a comment in their reactions to the performance. And then what did they think about it? And also if they enjoyed the performance and why. They follow the same procedure with another YouTube site. These on their page and work together on writing and co-editing clever and relevant comments in response. One of the pairs asked the teacher which is correct. There's a lot of reasons to like this performance, or there are a lot of reasons to like this performance. The teacher replies that the second sentence is the correct one. It is according to the grammar rule. But sentences like the first sentence are often used by native speakers of English these days. And then the final step. Students do a quick review about their wiki project. They will going to work in a small group, and each group working on one computer. And also, each group has only one topic, which is the Thai dance. And all the students will be making group presentation in class on their dances using a PowerPoint slides. The assignment for the next class is threefold. Students should update their blogs. Second, visit and update their Facebook page and respond to their classmate pages. And then third, think about and do some research on the wiki topic. They should each write a rough draft of the new materials that they want to add and email it to the teacher before the next class. And then the teacher will comment on their drafts, return the drafts to them electronically, and then save the students' drafts in an electronically portfolio.
So, good morning. I am Annette Villanueva and I'll be discussing the principles which underlies on the experience that was reported by the previous reporter. So, the first observation on the given experience is that when the class begins, there is a lively chatter about the assignments that the students have been working on. And the principles underlined onto that is that the students find online tasks to be motivating. Second activity is when the teacher asks the student to form a circle where they can see each other face to face. So with that, you can see that the language learning takes place through social interaction. So aside from reading different structures, different rules of grammar, we could also learn from experience in social interaction. Yeah, and yeah, it says that experience is the best teacher, right? So the third activity is when the student choose comments from their blogs to share. So the students are posting online about their about current events that is related to them or their thoughts or about something. And yeah, because it is online, everyone could post comments. So the students are choosing comments from their blogs to share. So with that, the principle underlined under that is the students are autonomous in what they share about themselves. The fourth activity is the language that they work on comes from comments that language learners in other parts of the world have made on their blogs. So since their target language is English, it would really be helpful for a learner to have the social interaction with the other people around the world. And the principle underlined under that is the students work on authentic language which comes from interaction with others through online or virtual communities. Fifth activity is when the teacher works with the students. The students work together to understand a confusing message and to determine how to respond to it. So in the experience, there was a comment that one student can interpret that much. So the teacher, what the teacher did is that she told to the student to discuss or to share this comment on the other students, and they brainstormed on to the comment and came up with something. So the principle underlined onto that is learning to negotiate meaning is important. Just for example, the Get a Grip. So there are online programs that help students to understand those unfamiliar words that they not yet familiar with. Six is the student use their native language to discuss a response. Yeah. So, since the target language is English and they were Thais, so they speak their language to further discuss the issue or something that needs to be discussed. Yeah, so the principle underlined under that is the use of students' native language can aid comprehension. So through our native language, we could um, further express our um, our thoughts and opinions. Next is 7. The teacher is not focused on specific language items but rather responds to what language emerges as a result of the student's work online. So the principle underlined to that is that there is less interest in linguistic structure and more interest in helping students deal with a specific communicative situation using language resources that are available to them. Hold on a second. That is available to them. So yeah, as what I said a while ago, um, the lesser we discuss the different rules, the greater, um, the higher the possibility that the students could learn more because of the experience. Yeah, the next one is when the students have created Facebook page with their profile. So the students construct their online identities in a way that is comfortable for them. The ninth is the students read their Facebook pages in pairs. So the language is learned by um, using it. The the 10th is when Sunny says, "Let's drink coffee." While this is grammatically accurate, it is not the way that an English speaker would convey this message. However, the teacher does not correct him. So it says here that the native speaker usage is not necessarily what the aim is. So there are still difference when the student, the native speaker speaks the target language versus the user of the target language uses the target language. So 11 is they consult a concordance and an online dictionary to work on a phrase. Yeah, the word get on grip, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, get a grip, which says that it's sometimes followed by on or off. Yeah, and there's also sites gives um that give sentences on how to use the phrase. So with this, we could see that the students are taught to use tools that technology provides. Yeah, so the software, we will further discuss that software. Reflecting on language and developing language awareness are important. The next is students observe what precedes and what follows a particular word or a phrase. And with that, language consists of patterns including collocations, words that go together. So the 13th activity is when they observe the sage is not used very frequently. Yeah, one of the student used the word sage, and one one foreign speaker or inter- um one speaker of the target language commented that sage is not very frequently used. So the principle underlined onto it is that knowing the frequency with which a word is used is a part of learning to use a language. Even in the Philippines, there are still words that was used in some areas and not usually or not known by the other area. Yeah. 14th is when the students watch YouTube videos and write a response. So with this, 14th, students need to become literate in the new technology. So YouTube is one of their rising online, what do you call that? Online sites. And yeah, we could also learn from the different videos uploaded on YouTube, and we could also interact there through writing a response or replying to a particular response. The 15th is the students co-edit their responses. With this, the students can learn from each other. So, yeah. And the 16th activity, in response to a student question about which sentence is correct, the teacher answers that one sentence is correct according to the grammar rule, but the other is used by the native speakers of the language. So on 16th, the principle of the 16th activity is that language is changed through use. It is dynamic and evolving entity. So the language is really changing. How we use the even here in the Philippines, there are words that was even the word marupok. The word marupok was usually before it was used to describe an old wood, but now it is now used to describe a person. Yeah, so that's how really the language change or evolves. On the 17th, students choose what to write and which topics to research. So the students 17, the students have a good deal choosing what they will change within and out of class. And the last observation from the activity is this: when the students are to write the draft of their wiki update and email it to their teacher. She adds it to each student's electronic portfolios. So we could see that the teacher used archives of online student work to evaluate and to guide them. So with that experience, we could really see how the technology affects the student, right? So it is really undeniably has an increasing presence in education. The next is reviewing the principles. Hold on a second. So now I'll be reviewing the techniques, or I'll be discussing the different options that the teacher use in providing language learning experiences. So there are um, so much options that can be discussed within a single lesson. But here are some of the most used options. So first is blogs. Blogs is an online diaries or journals. The word comes from a combination of web plus log. So blogs can be private and controlled with passwords, or it could also be public depending on the desire of the author. Most blogs allows Tour to post comments since blogs are written by people remarking on their troubles, daily life, current events. They are rich source of authentic material for reading and discussion and study. So it is first source of information. Yeah, because it is based on the blogger's own experience. Next is computer assisted language learning software. So CALL or CALS or computer assisted language learning software is an online program that is focused on specific elements of language such as vocabulary and grammar practice. So um, there is a wide variety of CALL software or websites that is available for the use of language learners where we could learn different vocabulary and practice grammar. Others are free and can easily be downloaded, and other must be purchased. So other programs are focused on providing guidance and practice for improving pronunciation. As with any materials for teachers or learners, there is a range of quality and usefulness among CALL programs. The next is digital portfolios. So in the experience event, the teachers are gathering all the students' work and putting it all in a digital portfolio. The European Language Portfolio is a standardized portfolio assessment tool that students can use to document their language learning experience and proficiency. Next is distance education. Distance education is what we're having right now. We are using technology and learning, such as Google Classroom, Zoom, and etc. It says that one of the online application of technology to language teaching is in the direct delivery of language instruction via web. An advantage of web-based instruction is that it provides access to languages that might not be available otherwise. For instance, recently, the University of California, Los Angeles went live with its web-based instructional programs in Azeri and Iraq dialect of Arabic. Although most research suggests that blended or hybrid instruction, which is some combination of face-to-face and distance education is better than total distance education. Obviously, distance education is better than having no opportunity to study language at all. Yeah, it is really indeed better for us to have this face-to-face learning type of learning, but since right now we have this pandemic, we are forced to do this distance learning. It's a bit challenging, but yeah, it is better than having no opportunities to learn at all. Next is electronic chatting. Electronic chatting is a synchronous activity that requires at least two people to be online in order to chat or in order to exchange ideas in real time. Skype is the best known for it. Yeah. With the great majority of chats are in writing, there is also fast growing number that also offer voice or video communication. Yeah. Skype is perhaps best known for it. It allows for real spoken communication across countries and continents. It could also be used locally, of course. For example, the teacher might have students conduct an interview of a local celebrity using the target language. So Skype is more formal and more fits onto formal into such formal interview, something like that. Next is e-pen pal. So similar to the original pen pal idea, students are encouraged to share in writing about themselves, their lives, and their cultures in the target language. So yes, there are a number of models or designs that for the e-pen pal approach. Sometimes the teacher provides, and the given activity, sometimes the teacher provides guiding questions that students can use to communicate with their e-pen pal, such as how would you describe your town, what is distinctive about community, and etc. So that's how they use e-pen pals. Next is electronic presentation. Yeah, and this is I'm so much familiar with since I am right now reporting to through this PowerPoint on but in my phone through MS Word. PowerPoint Microsoft PowerPoint allows the presenter, just like me, to use templates with variety of formats to create slides for presentations. The slides are presented by a compute hooked up to an LCD projector in a during an before during face-to-face type of learning. We are using LCD projector. We are using projector to make the presentation more visible to everyone. PowerPoint is being used by increasing numbers of teachers and students for in-class presentation. Yeah, so that's what I said. Next is electronic text corpora. My phone is yeah. Electronic text corpora are collections of language texts, most often written, but sometimes spoken text and transcript form. I'm just going to sometimes spoken in transcript form. The texts have been digitized and are therefore computer searchable. By the word, corpus analysis is a form of linguistic research which provides data on the real world uses of the words and collocations across various genres, registers, language, and varieties. Pedagogically, it can be used to support data-driven learning, that is, language study where learners analyze language features based on corpus evidence. Certain corpus linguists have based language teaching materials mostly or entirely on the corpus findings. Other methodologies advise that the teaching material should not be corpus driven but rather corpus informed. Next is cell phone based application, text messaging, and Twitter. Yeah, so users of text messaging and Twitter have developed their own form of language. So with the rapid expansion of the use of cell phone or mobile phones throughout the world, language learners have found new ways of learning. So through Twitter is an instant messaging system that lets people send brief, which is no more than 140 characters. Um, Send brief text messages to set of interested people on an activity, or even when they are participating to opinion they wish to offer. Yeah, I am a Twitter user and I often involve myself in different um trends in Twitter because that's what I'm that's what keeps me busy during this quarantine days. Twitter. The language used is typically informal, where the language sounds more like spoken language. Yeah, um, since Twitter requires no more than 140 characters, and I have a lot of I always have a lot of you know ideas or opinions. I keep on making shortcuts with the words. Just for example, are you okay? Instead of AREYOUOKAY, I use letter R, letter U, letter O, letter K. That's it. Are you okay? Yeah, and that is commonly used expression in Twitter and also in messaging. I also encountered when I was a child. I received a text which um says that 220. I read that as 220, but it was wrong. It is totoo. Yeah, totoo. And it's funny because it's so shortcut. Next is podcasts. Podcasts are digital audio and visual recordings that could also be downloaded. You can hold up. Yeah, I'm listening different podcasts, especially with Joel Austin podcast. I download every podcasts of Pastor Joel Austin, and yeah, I really learned a lot from it. So it is on YouTube. Yeah, there is also large number of different digital audio and visual recordings that is related to language learning, which we could learn from those. Next is social networking. Next, the purpose of this is for participants to share thoughts, activities, photos, and videos and links to websites with others whom they are connected through their social network site. So the best example for it is the Facebook. Um, there's so much more. Yeah. Facebook allows us to post updates about our lives, to updates different status about our feelings, activities that we do every day, and different events, highlights. Yeah, and wait. Next is wikis. Wiki comes from the Hawaiian expression wiki, which means quick, and it refers to a quick way to create and edit web documents. So Wikipedia is used in gathering information. Some are legit, and factual, but some are not, since it could easily be edited by even non-pros or non-experts. So yeah, we must still verify every information that we will be getting in wikis or even in different sites, because there's so much of there's an increasing number of fake news widespread in social media and different sites. Alright, so next is the conclusion. So with the discussion, this concludes that technology is evolving, yeah, from from the chalk and blackboards that we used before. Now we're here using our phones and learning. That's how technology is evolving and becoming part of our everyday. There is an undeniably increasing presence of technology in education. Without this technology, 2020 to 2021 school year wouldn't be possible because of the pandemic that we have. Yeah, so that's it for today. I hope you learned from my discussion. Thank you.
Good day, sir and classmates. I'm Emmanuel Napoles, and now we're going to have the last lesson that will conclude everything else we had before this. So, lesson 15, Introduction. First, in order for you to understand me better, I'm just saying the main idea and important parts of each slide and not the whole text included in the PPT, just to make things easier. I said this to avoid confusion in case you're trying to follow my words along with the PowerPoint presentation. And if you can still remember each method and the respective aspect of language they are concerned with and how language learning is promoted and the specific teaching practices as examples. The table only included major features of each approach. This table is basically a summarization, but there are three limitations when trying to present information with this. First, it's not made for dynamics in methodological change. Second, it obscures the similarities. And third, some differences aren't revealed when categorizing them globally. So, the dynamics of methodological change. So, the first one is dynamics of methodological change. And here, it is said that grammar translation method and other older language teaching methods such as all these uh, methods included in the table are still used, which say something about the unequal use in different parts of the world. Another example is the direct method, which is preserved in commercial language teaching such as in Berlitz schools. In the USA during 1950s and 60s, the audiolingual method reigned supreme up until Chomsky stepped up and made his point. This resulted in the great methodological diversity during 70s and 80s wherein numerous methods appeared. The silent way, community language learning, total physical response, suggestopedia, and natural approach are a few examples. The interest towards the subject reunited the field in 1980s, but the communicative approach wasn't universally accepted yet. CLT is used by many teachers, and these changes are fueled by evolving conceptions. Later on, innovation in the language teaching field in 1980s and 90s by concern for special language processes. Interacting or completing a task or language or learning content is deemed to be the best situation to execute language learning. Teaching learning strategies, using cooperative learning, and planning lessons are methodological innovations of the late 1980s and 1990s. In the 2000s, changes in the language teaching field have been made to respond to the influences such as continuing developmental technology. Here it is said that most of the language learning happens in classrooms with the exception of autonomous learning. An Austrian study found out that 15% of its citizens learned one or more foreign languages outside educational contexts, such as social networking sites, listening to popular music, and watching undubbed movies and television shows. All these forms of technology make modern styles to deliver learning online, blended, or a combination of both. The other influence is globalization. And even though it is not as new as technology, it gains more and more power as transnational population requires more languages to learn. Economic advancement is seen to be one of the fruits of language proficiency. More and more young people aim to be proficient in more languages that resulted in language being thought apart from culture. Speaking language defines someone's identity, according to Norton in 2011. According to Ortega, monolingualism is taken as the norm and second language acquisition is considered unnecessary, and it should not be monolinguals with whom emergent bilinguals should be compared for Garcia and Claflin in 2010. Teaching of languages is deemed critical for political or security purposes in the USA, whereas learning Russian language has been stopped for former Soviet territories. This political nature of language teaching has seen the emergence of teachers as advocates of issues regarding globalization, and these teachers feel that they can no longer be content to teach language. So this is the main highlight of this lesson. So this is the table, and basically these two pages shows the table with all the methods and approaches used from the past to present time, and the respective aspects of language teaching they are related to. So this is the table described in the first slides. And now we're going to discuss the comparison between all these approaches. Table 15.1, comparison of different methods and approaches. Clark argues that teachers should have the say in educational matters despite the belief that it is the local educator's work. Some situations affecting education beyond the control of teachers requires more preparation and development for teachers, that some standards are established for this matter according to Richards in 2008. Furthermore, these standards made program development, curriculum development, and assessment better. It is also according to Richards. These standards are often aimed to accomplished by all the people affiliated with education at all times, but we will move on and go back to this topic later on. So now this we're going back to the similarities of the methods. Similarities among language teaching methods. Here it is said that to teach students to communicate in a target language is the best way to achieve communicative proficiency. Usage is better by learning it little by little. And as it is said in the last sentence, students should learn to communicate by communicating. Yan. Another similarity is all these methods are practiced in educational contexts or in classrooms, and due to technology, even computer labs in the future. They also treat culture implicitly, and some make use of the fine arts such as the Suggestopedia. Lastly, culture may be seen as a fifth skill, in addition to reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And according to Cramch in 1993, explicit teaching of culture should be omitted, even if cultural values are learned alongside language and language teaching. And that's all we have for this part of the lesson. Miss Suako will take care of the rest. Thank you for listening.
Contradictory differences among language teaching methods. These are two particular kinds of differences. First, complementary differences. While each method emphasizes a different perspective on a learner, a teacher, or learning, taken together, they do not necessarily contradict each other, but rather help us to construct a more complete view. For instance, the language learner is not only a mimic, but is also a cognitive, affective, social, and political being. The same applies to the role of the language teacher. So in short, teacher and learning helping each other to point out the view between them. So according to Larson Freeman 1998a, not only is the teacher a model, ideal conductor, and a linguistic, but possibly also a counselor, facilitator, technician, collaborator, learner, trainer, and most recently an advocate. So therefore, teacher is multitasker because everything has a capability to fulfill for their student. Not only this is their job, but because this is what they want to do and to help their students to be knowledgeable in everything. So next, contradictory. For instance, notice that use of the student native language in the direct method and comprehension approach is prescribed, whereas in the grammar translation method and community language learning it is prescribed. Most recently, the restriction to avoid use of the student language has been challenged, with the student first language not being seen as an impediment to but rather as a resource of language learning by Widowson 2003 and Cook 2010. So it says that first language is the resources of the knowledge of every child. They could construct their thought using this because they can express their feelings well. Choosing among language teaching methods. At the end of this book, a reasonable question to ask: which method is best? After all, while we have seen that many of the methods presented in this book have characteristics in common, there are also some fundamental differences among them. And so, in the end, one does need to choose. However, there is two parts of the answer to the question of which method is used. Next. If we intend to make choices that are informed and not just intuitive or ideological, then we need to expand a little effort first in identifying our own values. Next, in tying those values to an appropriate set of larger aims. And only then devising or rejecting, adapting, or techniques. Our goal has been that you will use the principles and techniques in the method we have written about as a way to make explicit your own beliefs about the teaching learning process, beliefs based on your experience and your professional training, including the research you know about. So everyone has its own belief, which is based on their experience and also has a knowledge to decide of their decisions. Next, if the teacher engages in classroom activity with a sense of intellectual excitement, there is at least a fair probability that learners will begin to participate in the excitement and to perceive classroom lessons mainly as learning events and experiences of growth for themselves, according to Prabo 1992, page 239. Also, a theory helps us learn to look, Larson Freeman. So, if you are effective as a teacher, also your student will listen to you. They will not they will not get bored to the discussion. Instead, they will participate. Next is some some use this concern of coercion to argue that there can be no right method for everyone. They point out that some methods are more suitable for older learners, others for younger, or the some might be more appropriate for beginning level language study, but not for intermediate or advanced. They say that some methods clearly call for a level of language proficiency that not all language teachers possess. They warn the method should not be exported from one situation to another. By Holiday, 1994. We might call this position relativism. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses. Relativists believe, but they are not equally suited for all situations. Also, there is another version of the relativist position, one we might call pluralism, which many other teachers find reasonable. Rather than deciding to adopt or reject methods in their entirety as being suitable or unsuitable for a particular context. They believe that there are some value to each method by Bravo 1990. So next is moreover, if language is complex, then it makes sense that learning it is also complex, and therefore that associationism, habit formulation, rule formation, interactionism, emergentism, etc. by Bolster, 1983. Teachers have made their beliefs explicit, have constructed their own theories and fashioned a teaching approach in accordance with their theories, which may very well make allowances to difference among students, could be said to be practicing principled ellipticism. They are in effect creating their own method by blending aspects of other in principled manner. So teaching is the management of learning. So teachers who teach as if their practice causes learning, while recognizing that they are not in control of all the relevant factors, and that at the very least that they are in partnership with their students in this enterprise, can be true managers of learning. We are not speaking narrowly of classroom management, but rather more broadly someone who can live with the paradox of knowing that teaching does not cause learning, all the while knowing that to be successful one must if it does. Next, explicit with the values and ideals we wish to promote in our educational work by Van Leer, 2003. So, learning to teach, a developmental process, but there is another important dimension to the question of teaching method that must be considered, and that is the learning to teach is a developmental process by Freeman, 1991. Indeed, while there may not be any strict sequence of developmental stages in teaching, learning it is said to be a lifelong process.